Hi, it's me, Laura Pinto, here to talk to you about text, archival, and policy research. In your readings, you have a chance to explore a little bit about Dillebo's perspective in a certain type of historical research, and I think that gives you one overview. But there's a lot that we're covering this week, and this could be a course in itself. So this week you're getting a cursory overview on some different approaches to this type of research. There's the data collection. So as I mentioned, the Dillebo reading talks to you about a certain type of data collection, and I'm hoping that through this video I can just share with you some alternative types of historical, archival, and policy research. So in my dissertation research, and there's another video detailing a little bit more about what that is, I had to do both policy research and archival research. I was trying to piece together the chronology and the events that led to decisions about curriculum policy that was implemented. So in addition to hearing first-person accounts with interviews among those who were involved in the process, I also wanted to triangulate that and get a different type of perspective through documents. So I contacted the Archives of Ontario, which any person can do, and I got permission to research there. And I had to provide them with some documentation, so they needed to know a little bit about why am I doing this, what's the nature of my study, and that sort of thing. Once they gave me clearance, one of the things I had to do was to provide them with a finished copy of my research, which was the dissertation itself. Once I got that access, then I had to go through online in the Government of Ontario website to locate the box codes that contain the data, which are all housed in a warehouse. And when you identify series that you want to look at, they pull those boxes from the warehouse and they bring them to the archives, which is right downtown in the Queen's Park complex. Now, I like this little side story. The interesting thing is, before I embarked on my PhD journey, I worked for the Ontario Public Service, and I was a policy analyst and a policy manager. And once a year, we had a couple of days set aside where you had to clear out your files, and you had to put them in boxes, and you had to fill out forms that explained what was in those boxes. Because any correspondence that you have, so for example, letters from citizens, correspondence among the ministry, memos that you issue, memos that you receive, you're not supposed to throw anything away. And so that all goes in the boxes. It has to be filed correctly and so on. And as far as I know, everybody in the policy branches participates in this. But it never occurred to me what happened with that, other than I just thought it was boxes in case something comes up in the future. Once I was in the process of doing my dissertation, I realized, oh, this is one of the uses for those boxes, and I actually started to feel a little bit guilty that maybe my boxes were not filed with a researcher in mind. When I received those boxes that I ordered for my dissertation research, there were 33 banker's boxes. So if you think about what a banker's box is, it's like a file box a little bit larger than when you buy 10 reams of paper. And so things were in file folders, but they weren't labeled well. So I spent days in the archives, because that stuff can't leave the building. They put you in a room, they give you your boxes, and you just go through them, and you're allowed to make photocopies, which I did. But you have to sort through and make decisions about what's relevant to your research and what's not. Now, luckily, I had a pretty good sense of what I was up to, so it wasn't that difficult for me to identify textual pieces that were relevant. And the kinds of things that I kept were memos between and among different departments within the Ministry of Education that had to do with the curriculum policy production process. It was interesting because they also had a lot of reports and letters from organizations that were trying to influence policy. So that was pretty important to my research. There were a lot of timeline things that were useful to me, just in the sense of to try to reconstruct the stages of the policy. I had evidence of the sequence of events based on timelines that were sent to officials within the government, and that kind of thing. So that was really useful. Some of the things I knew existed that were not there were research reports by third-party companies that were hired to do research. So I was very frustrated that I didn't find those, but under the Freedom of Information Act, any citizen can request a document if you know what it is. So I had to go through a formal process of saying there was a document by a particular consulting company that I know was done. And I explained what it was and approximately when it would have been issued. And that actually was still in someone's filing cabinet in the ministry. So they made a photocopy of it, and under Freedom of Information, they provided me with a copy. None of this costs anything, at least not for an Ontario citizen. I don't know how it would work if it was someone from outside the province, but it was not a difficult process. So that's the process of data collection in that type of research. In terms of policy research, I gave you, as one of the suggested readings, a pretty large piece of research that I did that had to do with financial literacy policy. And for that one, I was using a different data set. I was interested in kind of the political statements around financial literacy policy production in Canada and in Ontario. So for that one, much of my research was just web-based, and I was doing things like getting speeches, policy documents, position papers, that kind of thing, and it was just all very easily available online. The second piece to that was I wanted to see how the politics played out in the public sphere, so I did a Canadian newsstands database search. You can read about the methodology that I used to collect the data there, and was trying to look to what policy documents, like the official policy documents, speeches, press releases, looked like versus what the public discourses were in the print news media. And so that was my data collection. So far I've just talked about the collection. Next comes the analysis. And so you have all this data, what do you do with it? And that's, a different kettle of fish. That is your other reading, and there are multiple ways to approach the analysis of data. In the Journal of Education Policy article, I chose to do something called narrative analysis of the, sorry, not narrative analysis.